Hello world, welcome to the channel. This is the Sabaton history channel. This was suggested to me after reviewing a few of the Sabaton music videos. I'm telling you, that Bismarck music video was insane. The graphics were great, the music was great. I'm really impressed with this band. So they have a history channel. This is called Hellfighters, a legend of Harlem Hellfighters, Sabaton 1, 2, 3. So I don't know anything about this story. It's apparently black people that fought in World War II, which is kind of a weird subject. If you think about the black experience in World War II, these were people that, don't even have the right to vote in their country, aren't really liked by their country, aren't really liked by the people fighting next to them. Yet their sacrifices and the things that they did, the stories are insane. So it's really cool to get a different country's perspective on some of these things. So I'm very interested in what's about to happen. And let's get into it, and I'll give you my opinion on the other end.
In the Great War, they were deployed for over 6 straight months in the field.
This week on Sabaton history, the Harlem Hellfighters.
Is
6
Satan
months.
going to be involved in this episode?
Satan is always involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
From a land across the ocean to the western front where they stood, full of courage and devotion, because that's the sun.
Wow.
Spring offenses kept churning, where the men would earn their name. See the tides of battles turning, and the force ignite their flame.
Hellfighters. That is what the Germans called them, the men of the U.S. 369th Infantry Regiment based in Harlem. So Harlem Hellfighters is how they are remembered today. And you know what? They served for 191 days under fire, 6 straight months, which was the longest deployment of any American unit during the Great War. But they never lost a foot of ground, nor ever had a man taken prisoner. Now,
Hexlad is the best
skip
gift
this.
for the everyday cook. Let me explain why. Here are the 4 reasons I only use Hex.
the unit was originally the 15th Infantry Regiment of the New York National Guard.
Oh, look.
This was created
They look
already
integrated.
before that war, and it was after pressure from people in black communities who wanted to serve in the U.S. National Guard. When the U.S. joined the war and began sending troops to Europe in 1917, the 369th was shipped out December 27th. They arrived in France on New Year's Day 1918 and joined the 185th Infantry Brigade.
Remember, this is a segregated unit. They weren't allowed to fight integrated with other white units. They had to have their own unit.
Their unit was not given combat training, though, but they were instead assigned manual labor duties like digging latrines. And they experienced a great deal of racial harassment from Army officials.
You think?
American Commander John Pershing sort of loaned the 369th to the French 161st Division in April, and it was only after that they would begin to earn their combat honors.
See, the thing is, we weren't going to give them a chance. The European, the English and the French were a far less racist and more willing to let black people do things than their American counterparts, unfortunately.
The unofficial reason for this loan really was that some white soldiers refused to serve alongside African Americans.
See?
In fact, the American Expeditionary Force even released a pamphlet, which I guess I can best describe as incredibly racist, to the whole French army. A pamphlet called Secret Information Concerning Black American Troops, or SICBAT. SICBAT requested that the French troops, most of whom did not share the prevalent racist views of their American counterparts, or at least not to the point of segregation, it requested that they stop treating African Americans as equals. It warned of their tendency towards rape, claiming, quote, "The black American troops in France have, by themselves, given rise to as many complaints for attempted rape as the rest of the army." This was not true. It also requested that the French troops not eat meals with them, or even shake hands with them,
Unbelievable.
nor commend them too highly, as this would lead to them thinking themselves more important than they were.
Let me tell you something. Until they save your ass, right? Then they'll get your respect, right?
And that, could be harmful to American society after the war. The French army, for its part, basically just welcomed the reinforcements. They'd been fighting and dying on their own land for 3 years by then. New soldiers were a godsend. In mid-April, the 369th was assigned to a 4.5-kilometer stretch of the front in the Argonne, under the command of French General Henri Gouraud. And they were issued French rifles and helmets and things like that. Their motto was, "God damn, let's go." They still did not receive combat training, though. Well, as I said at the beginning, they served for over 6 straight months, and they suffered 1,300 casualties during that time, which was the most of any U.S. Army regiment. Yet, despite their obvious bravery, they were not well treated. Combat troops were sometimes taken out of the line to serve as orderlies. Pay was stopped to nearly the entire regiment at one point. They had to go through things like that. And it wasn't just during the war either. When they left France to go home in early 1919, their regimental band wasn't even allowed to play as they marched to the transport ship. It was February when the by then Harlem Hellfighters returned to New York.
Look good, what good spirits they look in too. This is crazy, you guys. I mean, to beat someone down in every direction and they still have the spirit to fight. I mean, it says something.
And they had a victory parade along Fifth Avenue led by Sergeant Henry Johnson. The parade really showcased that whatever had happened overseas, it was not reflected back home, since the parade was all black. The Hellfighters and the other African American regiments were not allowed to participate in the main victory parade. That was strictly segregated. Having said that, they were the first New York unit to return home, and they were placed on the permanent list like other veteran units.
God, you gotta love these lyrics. It's so descriptive.
The French government, by the way, awarded the Croix de Guerre, the highest military honor, to 170 soldiers of the 369th, including Henry Johnson, the parade leader, who was the first American to receive that award for their efforts and their achievements during the war. Johnson performed some of the most remarkable feats of this or any other war in May 1918. He was a private at the time. Okay, the night of the 14th, he and another private, Needham Roberts, were on sentry duty. Now, Johnson would later say that he thought it was crazy to send out untrained men as sentries, but a job is a job and an order is an order. Well, the two came under fire from German snipers. They're pinned down in their dugout, so they lined up a box of grenades to be ready just in case the Germans raided them. Just after 2 a.m., Johnson heard wire cutters at the perimeter fence, and he told Roberts to hightail it back and alert the French. Then Johnson threw a grenade, which the Germans answered with grenades and gunfire. Roberts turned back to help Johnson, but was hit by grenade shrapnel and was badly injured. Johnson managed to get him back to the dugout, but now they were outnumbered by 20 or 30 Germans coming from multiple directions. Johnson ran out of grenades, and he even took a few bullets, but he kept on firing his rifle into the darkness until it jammed. He had accidentally put in French ammunition in the American rifle. Well, the Germans were right on top of him after that, so he used his rifle as a club until the stock splintered. Johnson took a blow to the head and he went down. But when the Germans tried to grab Roberts, Johnson got up again and attacked them with his bolo knife, the only weapon he had left. He wounded one German, killed another, took a pistol shot to the arm, and stabbed yet another German who'd climbed on his back. Suddenly, the Germans ran away since they heard the French and Americans arriving on the scene. Johnson had reportedly killed 4 Germans and wounded over 24.
Holy
and
shit.
He himself sustained 21 wounds. You can imagine the praise he received for this, but he said later, there wasn't anything so fine about it, just fought for my life.
Right.
Rabbit would have done that.
Dude could fight is what it is.
He was given the nickname Black Death after this, and post-war he would do lecture tours. On these tours, he was supposed to talk about racial harmony in the trenches, which was a big fat lie.
Yeah.
And in some places, he definitely did not do this, talking instead about the abuse and the harassment he and his comrades had to endure. Now, contrary to what multiple sources claim, he did receive disability pay from the U.S. government. But also contrary to multiple sources, when he died in 1929, it was from myocarditis and not alcoholism. But you know what?
Wow.
Henry Johnson was not awarded any medals by the U.S. Army or the U.S. government until posthumously long after his death.
It's terrible.
But hey, back to that regimental band. Maybe you think it's not too big a deal that they weren't allowed to play on the March to the Ship, just a little snub. But their band was a big deal. Like other regimental bands, they played to boost morale. But unlike other regimental bands, by the end of the war, they were one of the most famous bands in all of Europe. In early 1918, they traveled thousands of kilometers playing for British, French, and American military and French civilian audiences, and introduced early jazz music to Europe, which was a very big deal. James Reese Europe, the leading figure of New York's African-American music scene during the teens, was their band leader. His story has a tragic end, though. He was stabbed by one of his musicians May 9th, 1919, during an argument in a show's intermission. But since it was only with a little penknife, he and his bandmates thought the wound, even though it was in the neck, was superficial. He told the band to finish the show after the intermission. But the hospital was unable to stop the bleeding, and he died a few hours later.
Wow.
Then he was the first African-American ever to have a public funeral in New York City. There are a bunch of notable soldiers of the 369. You can look them up yourself, and there are loads of books about the Harlem Hellfighters out there too, which will give you a better idea of the unit, the men, their service, and of course the trials they faced because of their skin color, as well as details about the frontline combat the Harlem Hellfighters bravely fought in the war to end all wars.
Wow. These old animations look crazy.
What is this interview about?
Harlem Hellfighters.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, go.
Thank you. Well, actually, this is one of the stories that
This is the first time I've heard the lead singer of Sabaton speak, so this is really interesting.
already when we did the Great War album was one of the first that came to our mind. However, it didn't make it on the album, which was one of the topics people were asking about.
Sure.
How did you miss that? But just we didn't have the music, you know.
Okay, so that was like Christmas Truce.
Exactly.
Came out. Okay.
One of the top stories that we, you know, came straight to us directly when talking about making an album about the Great War.
Yeah.
That was one of the first topics. But yeah, we didn't have the right music. It's a weird thing that it's kind of important that the music and the story speak the same emotional language. And
Sure.
yeah, we tried to squeeze it in onto other songs, you know, but no, it didn't work out.
Artistic
But
integrity.
I'm really happy that we did because it has a bit more of a punishing vibe to it, the music as well. And it was sort of, when me and Chris wrote the music, we sort of, I mean, when we started, we didn't know what we were writing, but it wasn't long until, I'd say, you know, maybe once we had the idea of a verse or a chorus, we already felt like, this is the one. This is the one about the Harlem Hellfighters.
But that's interesting that you said you started writing the music, because obviously if you had the idea for this, one might think that you had already maybe written lyrics, but hadn't figured music for it. Was it all written at the same time, the music and the lyrics together?
No, in this case, we sort of figured out what it was as we were writing the music.
Okay.
In most cases, when writing music, you have an idea of around what it possibly could be, or sometimes, I'm sorry to burst any bubbles here, sometimes you're just playing around trying to come up with a cool-ass riff, you know, or something like that.
Or you're writing in a toilet visit on toilet paper.
That has happened too.
That has happened. Check that episode out. Well, what was the actual first song you wrote for the Great War then? The very first one, music and lyrics.
It's really nice to hear him really consider what point in history and how he wants to develop the music around it. It isn't just throwing it out there. He's really thinking about how he wants these stories told and the feeling he wants to give you when you're listening to this music. That's really good.
The Great War, I don't remember, but for the war to end all wars, it was Christmas Truce.
It was Christmas Truce.
It was Christmas Truce because I promised myself, once we realized we're going to go back into that, you know, World War I era again, that I'm going to make that first so we don't miss it.
Yeah, I think I was mentioning this as World War II, but they're obviously talking about World War One, and they do a lot of World War One stuff, which is surprising. So this is really, really neat because you don't really hear a lot about World War One that often because it kind of gets glossed over with World War II. And again, this is really interesting to hear a perspective from another country. This is good.
Well, okay, what was the last one?
Oh, good question. You shouldn't ask me things I don't remember, you know.
You can tell we really prepare for these interview
Yeah,
sections,
exactly.
you know. List of questions.
Good.
I
Seems
don't
real.
really remember. Oh yeah, I do. Stormtroopers was the final one to be
Okay,
finished.
cool.
Yeah, actually,
All right.
yeah.
What was it about Hellfighters, other than the fact that, you know, people had, you know, written in asking for it and things like that? What was it that grabbed you so much about them that you really wanted it as one of the very first topics, whether or not you could make a song about it?
I think the story, obviously, but
Yeah.
also it has the coolest metal name, isn't it? For
Yeah.
a heavy metal song, Hellfighters.
That's one of your most metal names.
Yeah, it is.
Metalizer is pretty, but that's not really history.
Nah, it's a pretty shitty song as well. Sorry, but
Hey, they're your songs. I'm going to start singing about some of their
probably
songs.
piss somebody off who really likes that song now.
One of these days,
I'm so
like,
sorry.
we should be talking about one of your songs. You could be, I don't know, pick anyone. And you'll say, I'm not going to ask you how you wrote the song because it's kind of a shitty one.
Yeah.
So I'll just,
Say that one.
now, when you were writing the song, you obviously were doing research about the Hellfighters. Were you researching about the individuals, like Henry Johnson, who I just talked about? Yeah.
Because obviously back in the day, I think in 2010, we had a song about a guy called the White Death, Simo Häyhä.
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh,
And
right, yeah.
Then
The sniper.
we read about there was somebody called the Black Death.
Yeah.
And then sort of that piqued the interest and made it even more interesting in a way.
There's got to be some more colored deaths out there that you could do songs about.
Pink
Red Death.
There's got to be a red. There's going to be a red death somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, you know, blood and stuff like
yeah.
that.
Oh, I was thinking about the color used usually in a certain kind of politics.
Oh, right. Yeah, Russian.
You guys, we might have a whole Sabaton album theme coming up. It could be called The Colors of Death. And you could do another song about Simo Häyhä, and another song. You could do a whole song about Henry Johnson. I mean,
absolutely.
you heard the story I just told. I mean, that's brilliant. And I love, he actually, there was more colorful language than I just used when he said that sending untrained soldiers out on sentry duty was crazy. It was a little more emphatic than that. That was what he actually said. But it is crazy. I mean, can you imagine that? Imagine these guys did not have combat training, right? They were first just, you know, digging toilets and things like terrible menial jobs. But somebody has to do it in wartime. But, you know, being African American soldiers, they got stuck with it with the American Army at the time. But they still didn't get combat training when they were with the French, when they were loaned to the French. But they were in combat. I mean, they got combat training on the job, but you would usually prefer that beforehand, you know?
Yeah, that's something you really want some training on before doing it. You know?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, think what it must have been like to be not just fighting in the war, but to be one of the Harlem Hellfighters fighting in the war. To not be trained, to be doing sentry duty, to still manage to kill 4 Germans and wound like 20 more.
Crazy.
Imagine how exhausted you are after that time long
Right.
of a deployment.
Yeah. What
6
did I say,
months?
192 or 193 days?
Terrible.
You just heard it 10 minutes ago. I forget exactly how many it was. That's over 6 straight months. And something I did not mention in the episode, they made up in terms of amount of people. The Harlem Hellfighters were like 1% of the American armed forces there, but they were deployed. It's over 30% of the
Total deployment time.
Yeah, of the territory
Wow.
that they would allotted to them. They had a large amount of territory to cover. And stuff.
Crazy.
I mean, it wasn't particularly
Doing with the
active.
French or on
Yeah,
their
when they
own?
were alone with the. I mean, no, their territory where they were assigned to.
Okay.
Their assignment and stuff. Somebody would have to look up the exact numbers, which you can do that, and then you can write it in the comments.
Homework.
So it's nice giving people homework. You know,
Yeah.
maybe.
Let's see who's first on the comments with that one.
Wait, here's a good homework for somebody who really, really wants the gold star. Somebody who really wants a special little present from me and Joachim. We'll decide what it is later. Write a song about Henry Johnson.
Yeah.
Write a song about Henry Johnson. Send it in. We might not play it to anyone, but if it's really good, we can give him a present of something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty good. All jokes aside, I mean, what they had to endure and what they achieved is, you could say that about many units during the war because it was
Sure.
such a war of privations and problems and issues,
Yep.
and the desperation in the trenches and stuff, and the bravery that kept people going.
Imagine fighting for a country that, I'm not saying hates you, but makes you feel like they hate you. You know what I mean? It's weird.
But still, this should be a tribute. So we'll end it as a tribute. Ladies and gentlemen, the Harlem Hellfighters endured a great deal without combat training, and yet emerged as one of the most legendary units of not just the Great War, but the 20th century, right?
Indeed.
All right. Well, that is it for today.
Very cool.
All from
I'm
Sabaton
so
History.
impressed.
Hope to see you again very soon.
Very soon. Satan.
All right, everyone, that's it for this week. So remember to click that bell. It's really important. Click it now. And then, hope to see you again in the near future. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that's the video. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the suggestion. I'm probably going to look at a lot more of these. These look really neat. I'm very into history. I do a lot of the Fat Electrician videos. Matter of fact, I think he did another soldier that was in World War I or World War II, so I'm going to take a look at that one as well. Just so you know a little bit about me, I come from a very mixed family. I experienced a lot of racism. We moved to Phoenix, Arizona in the early or late 70s. And half of my family's black. My two older half-sisters are black. My stepdad that raised me is black. And, you know, a lot of my extended family is black. So, you know, yeah, I've seen the evolution of racism, at least from that point. And so I'm you know, I'm a little sensitive to this kind of stuff, but you know, I have an opinion about it for sure. So just let me know what you think, and please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate your time.